This is a five-star hotel, not a shelter for people who wandered in off the street. I'd suggest you take the boy and find somewhere else to sleep." Vanessa Crane said it without lowering her voice, and the words carried across the marble lobby to the few people still awake at that hour. She said it the way a person says a thing they have already decided is true, watching the tired man in the worn jacket, the sleeping child on his shoulder, waiting for him to be embarrassed enough to leave. Ethan Ward did not argue. He shifted his son a little higher against his chest, so the boy's head rested more comfortably, and he looked at her for a long, quiet moment. Then he turned and carried Leo toward the far end of the lobby, took out his phone, and made a single call. 40 minutes later, before the night was over, not one member of that hotel's overnight management would still have a job. Ethan Ward had learned a long time ago that the surest way to see how a place really worked was to walk into it looking like no one worth impressing. He was 41 years old, and he had stopped dressing to be believed. That night he wore a canvas jacket gone soft at the elbows, jeans, and boots that had carried him through 2 airports and a 3-hour drive. He had not shaved. He had the particular gray tiredness of a man who had been traveling since before dawn and was running on the last of himself. He looked like a father at the end of a long day, arriving somewhere he couldn't quite afford. And in the parts that mattered, that was exactly the impression he had come to leave. The Crestmont rose 22 floors above the center of the city, a flagship property with a lobby of pale marble and low golden light, the kind of hotel where the staff were trained to glide rather than walk. At a few minutes past midnight it was nearly empty, a bartender closing down the far lounge, a night porter near the luggage stand, and behind the long front desk, a young clerk on the phone who did not look up when the automatic doors slid open. Ethan carried his son inside. Leo was 7 years old and had spent most of the last 2 hours drifting in and out of a feverish half-sleep, his cheek hot against his father's neck, one hand fisted in the collar of the canvas jacket. He had been a trooper about the whole trip right up until the fever came on somewhere over the last state line, and now he only wanted, in the small, cracked voice of a very tired child, a bed. Ethan had promised him one. There was a reservation under his own name, a corner suite on the 18th floor, booked and paid for, confirmed that afternoon. He set his bag down at the desk, adjusted his son's weight, and waited for the clerk to finish the call. What Ethan had not told anyone at the Crestmont, and did not intend to, was why he was really there. 2 months earlier, Halcyon Group had acquired the company that owned the Crestmont brand 9 hotels across 4 cities. This one, the crown of them. Ethan Ward had founded Halcyon 11 years ago with a single boutique property and a theory that most people in hospitality had forgotten, that the quality of a place was not what happened in the daylight, when managers were watching, but what happened at midnight, when they weren't. He had built the group into something large by never quite believing the reports that crossed his desk, and by doing, once or twice a year, exactly what he was doing now, checking in under his own name, unannounced, as an ordinary guest, to see for himself. He was the chairman of the company that owned the marble under his feet. The people about to decide he did not belong in it worked for him. None of them knew it yet, and he had not planned to tell them. He had planned to get his son into bed and quietly watch how the night shift ran. He had learned to distrust daylight a long time ago. In the daylight, every property he owned performed beautifully. The managers were present, the reports were clean. The mystery shopper scores that crossed his desk each quarter were reliably excellent. But Ethan Ward had built a career on a single, unglamorous conviction that a place is not what it is when it knows it is being graded. A hotel is what it is at midnight on a slow Tuesday, when the senior staff are asleep and the only people awake are a tired clerk, a bored manager, and whoever happens to walk through the door looking like they don't matter. That was the real audit, and it could not be scheduled, because the moment it was scheduled, it stopped being true. So a few times a year he ran it himself, in the only way it could honestly be run, by becoming, for one night, the person a hotel was least likely to try for. He had not expected the Crestmont to fail. It was the crown of the group, the flagship, the property whose numbers he showed to investors. That it would fail this badly, this fast, over something this basic, was a thing he had not braced for, and it landed harder because of it. He had brought Leo because the trip had lined up with one of his rare stretches of custody, and because he had not wanted to spend the night away from his son to spare a hotel an inspection it did not know it was getting. He had told himself the boy would sleep through it. He had not planned on the fever, and he had certainly not planned on his sick child becoming the exact instrument that revealed what the place was, a tired father with a boy who needed a bed. The most sympathetic figure a hotel could ever be handed, turned away in under 10 minutes. If the Crestmont would do this to them, it would do it to anyone. That was the only thing the night was really measuring, and the measurement was already, quietly, catastrophic. The plan lasted about 90 seconds. The clerk's name was Tyler, and he had been on the overnight desk at the Crestmont for 8 months. He finished his call, set down the phone, and let his eyes travel over the man in front of him. The soft jacket, the unshaven face, the scuffed boots, the child. Something in his expression settled, the way a face settles when it has quietly reached a conclusion. He did not ask how he could help. He said, "Can I do something for you?" in the tone reserved for people you expect to be a problem. Checking in. Ethan said, "Ward? Ethan Ward. There should be a corner suite on 18. Tyler typed the name, or appeared to. He looked at the screen for a moment, then looked back up with the faint, practiced regret of someone about to enjoy delivering bad news. "I'm not finding anything under that name," he said. "Are you sure your reservation's with us? Sometimes people mix us up with the property down the road." "It's with you," Ethan said evenly. "I booked it this afternoon. I have the confirmation." He shifted Leo to his other shoulder, freed a hand, and pulled up the email on his phone. He turned the screen toward Tyler. The confirmation was clean, the Crestmont's name and logo. A corner suite, 18th floor, the reservation number, paid in full. Tyler barely glanced at it. "Our system's the source of truth, sir, not an email," he said. "If it's not in the system, there's not much I can do at this hour. We may be fully committed tonight." He was not, in fact, fully committed. There were 11 rooms open. But the man in front of him did not look like the kind of guest the Crestmont went out of its way for. And it was late. And it was easier. This is the small, unremarkable way these things begin. Not with cruelty. With a judgment made in the first 5 seconds, and a clerk who decides that checking properly is more trouble than the person in front of him is worth. Behind Ethan, the automatic doors slid open again, and the temperature of the room changed. Roland Ashcroft came through them the way weather comes through a valley. He was in his late 50s, in a dark overcoat that had been cut for him and him alone, and he moved with the loose, absolute ease of a man who had not carried his own bag in 20 years. He was a real estate developer whose name was on 3 towers in that city, and he stayed at the Crestmont often enough that the overnight staff knew his drink and his preferences, and the exact register of deference he expected. A porter reached for his single leather bag before he had finished crossing the threshold. Behind the desk, Tyler straightened. A door to the back office opened, and a woman came out. Vanessa Crane, the night manager, mid-40s, in a sharp charcoal suit that she wore like a uniform of authority. She had run the Crestmont's overnight operation for 3 years, and she ran it, in her own estimation, flawlessly. She had a way of reading a lobby that had nothing to do with reservations and everything to do with appearances, and she had already read this one. Her eyes passed over Ethan and his sleeping child and registered them as a situation to be resolved, and then they moved to Roland Ashcroft and warmed by several degrees. "Mr. Ashcroft," she said, coming around the desk. "We weren't expecting you tonight. It's always a pleasure." "Vanessa." Ashcroft let the porter take his coat. He glanced at the man standing at the desk with a child on his shoulder, and something in his mouth curled. "I see you're running a very inclusive establishment these days." Vanessa smiled as though he had said something clever. "We do our best," she said. Ethan let it pass. He was watching, in the way he had trained himself to watch, noting who moved toward money and who moved toward need. Noting the porter by the luggage stand, a young man who had taken half a step toward Ethan and Leo before Vanessa's arrival had frozen him in place. He filed all of it away. He said to Tyler, still calm, "The reservation's under Ward. Corner suite. 18. It's paid. If it's not showing up, the problem is on your end. And I'd like you to look again properly this time. My son isn't well and it's late." Tyler didn't move to the keyboard. He looked, instead, at Vanessa. The way a junior person looks at a senior one when he wants the decision taken off his hands. Vanessa stepped up to the desk. "I'm the night manager," she said. "Is there a problem?" "There's a reservation your clerk can't find," Ethan said. "And I don't think he's looked." "Ward, it's in your system." He turned the phone toward her, the confirmation still on the screen. She did not look at the phone either. She looked at the jacket, and the boots, and the child, and she made the same calculation Tyler had made, only faster and with more authority behind it. "Sir," she said, "even if there was a booking, we've had some issues tonight, and I'm not sure we have anything appropriate available. It might genuinely be easier for you to try another property. There's a perfectly nice place 2 blocks down that would suit." She paused, and let the pause do the work. "That would suit you better." Roland Ashcroft laughed. It was not a loud laugh. It was worse than loud. It was easy, unbothered. The laugh of a man watching something mildly amusing happen to someone beneath him. "Some people," he said, to no one in particular, examining his watch, "really cannot tell the difference between a hotel and a place to get out of the rain." Ethan let the laugh pass, too, though something in him went very still at the sound of it. He had been doing this long enough to know that there was a specific kind of person who revealed themselves not in how they treated the powerful, but in how comfortable they were being cruel to the powerless in public, how little it cost them, how easy it was, how much they enjoyed the small audience. Roland Ashcroft was that kind of person. And so, it was becoming clear, was the woman behind the desk, and the clerk beside her. Ethan had a phone in his pocket that could end this in 90 seconds. He was aware of it the way you are aware of a door you have chosen not to walk through yet. He did not reach for it. He wanted, in a cold and deliberate way that he was not proud of but did not fight, to see how far they would take it if no one stopped them. He wanted to know exactly what his hotel was, at midnight, to a man who could do nothing for it. He was about to find out. Leo stirred against his father's shoulder. "Dad," he said, thick with sleep and fever. "Is there a bed yet?" "Soon, buddy," Ethan said quietly. "Soon." He did not raise his voice. He turned back to Vanessa, and when he spoke, it was flat and precise, the voice of a man who knows he is right and has no interest in performing it. "I'm not going to another hotel. I booked this one. I paid this one. My reservation is in your system, and if you open it and look, you'll find it under Ward, made at 2:40 this afternoon, for a corner suite on 18. It will take you 30 seconds. I've asked 3 times. Vanessa's expression cooled another degree. She was not accustomed to being spoken to like that by a man in a canvas jacket, and the fact that he was right, she had not looked, and some part of her already suspected what she would find if she did, only made her more determined not to look. It is a particular kind of pride, the kind that would rather be wrong loudly than right quietly. "Let me be clear," she said. "I make the decisions on this shift, and I've decided we can't accommodate you tonight. Now." She gestured, almost gently, toward the doors. "I'd like you to move along before this becomes a scene." Near the luggage stand, the young porter had gone very still. His name was Sam, and he was 23, and he had worked at the Crestmont for a little over a year. He had watched the whole exchange with his jaw tightening, and now, in the pause after Vanessa's words, he did the only thing he could think to do. He crossed to the small refreshment table by the concierge desk, took a bottle of water and a wrapped biscuit, and brought them over. He crouched slightly so he was level with the boy on Ethan's shoulder. "Hey," he said softly. "You thirsty, little man? Got some water here." Leo took the bottle with both small hands. Ethan looked at the young porter, really looked at him. The first person in that lobby to treat his son like a child rather than a problem, and something in his face changed, though not in the direction anyone watching would have expected. "Thank you," he said. "What's your name?" "Sam." "Sir." "Thank you, Sam." Vanessa's voice cut in, cold now. "Sam, back to your station." Then Roland Ashcroft, bored of watching, decided to be useful in the way men like him understand usefulness. "Vanessa, while you sort out your vagrancy problem," he said. "I assume my usual suite is ready. The corner on 18. I like the view." And here the night turned on a hinge so small that most of the people in the lobby did not hear it click. Because the corner suite on 18, the one Roland Ashcroft called his usual, was the one Ethan Ward had booked that afternoon. It was in the system. Vanessa knew, in the part of her mind she was refusing to consult, that it was in the system, and she made her choice. "Of course, Mr. Ashcroft," she said. "I'll have it ready for you in 5 minutes. On the house tonight, for the inconvenience of the wait." She turned to Tyler. "Set up 18 for Mr. Ashcroft." Tyler's fingers hovered over the keyboard. Even he hesitated. But he typed. Ethan watched a suite he had paid for be given away, as a courtesy, to a man who had mocked his child. He did not move. When he spoke, his voice had not risen at all, and somehow that made it land harder in the quiet room. "You just assigned my room to him," he said. "You didn't look at the reservation, because you already knew what you'd find, and it was easier to give a paying guest's room to a man you'd rather please. I want you to understand that I saw you do that. Everyone here saw you do that." "Are you threatening me?" Vanessa said. "No," Ethan said. "I'm telling you what happened. There's a difference, and you're about to learn it." "That's enough." Vanessa reached for the phone on the desk. "I'm calling security to escort you out. You've upset a guest. You're disrupting the lobby. And you won't leave when asked. I've been more than patient." She lifted the receiver. "You have 30 seconds to walk out that door on your own, or I'll have you removed. With the child." That was the moment the situation could still have been saved. It would have taken 30 seconds and a keyboard. Nobody reached for the keyboard. Ethan looked at her for a long, unhurried breath. Then he adjusted Leo against his shoulder, picked up his bag, and turned. He did not shout. He did not appeal to the bartender or the porter or the empty lobby. He carried his son toward the far end of the room, near the tall windows that looked out over the sleeping city. And he set the bag down. And he took out his phone. Vanessa watched him go with the small, satisfied expression of a person who believes she has just handled something. She could not have known that she had, in fact, just ended her career, and 2 others, and set in motion a night that the Crestmont's regional office would still be discussing a year later. It did not look like a mistake. From where she stood, these things rarely do. Ethan sat Leo carefully in one of the deep lobby chairs, tucked the canvas jacket around the boy's shoulders, and pressed the back of his hand to his son's forehead. Still warm. 2 minutes, he murmured. Then we'll have you in a bed. I promise. Leo nodded, eyes already closing, the water bottle still clutched to his chest. Then Ethan straightened, walked a few steps toward the window where his voice would not carry, and made his call. He did not call the police, or a lawyer, or the front desk of another hotel. He called a woman named Claire Bennett, and Claire Bennett was the chief operating officer of Halcyon Group. Here is what no one at the Crestmont knew. Not Tyler, not Vanessa, not Roland Ashcroft, laughing by the desk. The man they had just tried to put out on the street with a feverish child was the single largest shareholder and the founding chairman of the company that owned the building they were standing in. He did not merely have a reservation. He owned the reservation system. He owned the marble, the golden light, the suite on 18, and every job on that overnight shift. He had come to the Crestmont for one reason: to see, with his own eyes, how the place treated a tired man who looked like he had nothing to offer. He had gotten his answer in under 10 minutes, and it was worse than anything a report could have told him. Claire Bennett picked up on the second ring. It was past midnight, but she had worked for Ethan Ward for 9 years, and she had learned that when he called at this hour from a property, it was never small. He gave her a plain account. He did not editorialize. He told her which hotel, the names on the badges as he had read them, the reservation they had refused to find, the suite they had reassigned to another guest as a courtesy, and the fact that he was currently standing in the lobby of his own flagship with a 6-7-year-old, having been given 30 seconds to leave before security removed them both. He said it the way he said everything, without heat, without drama, which somehow made it far worse to hear than if he had shouted. Claire Bennett said very little. When he finished, she said, "Don't move. Don't say anything to them yet. Give me 10 minutes." What happened in the next 10 minutes was not visible from the lobby floor, but it moved very fast. Claire's first call went to the Crestmont's regional director, a man named Marcus Dwyer, who was asleep in a house 40 minutes from the hotel and who was fully awake by the end of the first sentence. Her second call went to the group's overnight operations line, which had access to every property's reservation system in real time. It took the operator 11 seconds to find it ward. Ethan, corner suite, floor 18, booked 2:40 p.m., paid in full. Status active. It had been in the system the entire time. It had never not been in the system. And at 12:14 a.m., a log entry showed that suite reassigned to one Roland Ashcroft, at no charge, by a manager override under the credentials of Vanessa Crane. There was no confusion to untangle. No duplicate booking, no glitch, no misunderstanding. There was a paid reservation, a manager who had chosen not to honor it, and a guest who had been told to take his child and go. That was the part that made it unrecoverable, from a corporate standpoint, and Claire Bennett saw it immediately. A mistake could be apologized for. A system error could be fixed and explained. But there was no mistake here to hide behind, no software to blame, no honest confusion to point to. The record showed a deliberate sequence of choices, made by people whose entire job was to make the opposite ones, and it showed them in an order that could not be reordered into anything sympathetic. "Look again," the guest had said 3 times. Nobody had looked. That was not a glitch. That was a decision, repeated, about whose comfort was worth a keystroke and whose was not. And it had been captured, minute by minute, by the hotel's own cameras, which meant that whatever the company did next, it would be doing it with full knowledge of exactly what had happened, in front of a chairman who had watched it happen to his own child. There was only one direction a night like that could go. Claire Bennett did not send an email. She called the front desk of the Crestmont directly. Tyler answered, in the smooth voice he used for phones. "Front desk, this is Tyler. How may I?" "This is Claire Bennett, Chief Operating Officer of Halcyon Group," she said. "Put your night manager on, now." Across the lobby, Ethan watched Tyler's face change. He watched the young man's easy posture drain out of him in real time, watched him hold the receiver out toward Vanessa with a hand that had gone unsteady, watched Vanessa take it with the last of her irritation still on her face, and then, second by second, watched that irritation turn into something else. She said, "Yes," she said. Yes." She looked, involuntarily, across the lobby, to the tired man in the canvas jacket standing calmly by the window, and the color left her face entirely, all at once, the way water leaves a glass. When she hung up, she did not put the phone down so much as let go of it. For a moment she simply stood there, one hand still resting on the desk as though she needed it to stay upright, and she made the walk across the lobby with her eyes the tired man in the canvas jacket, the sleeping child, the phone he had lowered from his ear, the calm that had never once broken in all the minutes she had spent trying to break it. She was replaying, she realized, every second of the last 20 minutes with new information laid over the top of it, and every second was worse than the one before. "Look again," he had said. Properly this time. She had heard it as the demand of a nuisance. She was hearing it now as what it had actually been a man giving her, over and over, the chance to simply do her job, and watching her refuse. He had not been threatening her when he said she was about to learn the difference between telling him what happened and threatening him. He had been telling her the truth, and she had been too certain of her own authority to hear it. Tyler, beside her. had gone the specific shade of a young man who has just understood that the ground he was standing on was never solid. That was... He started, and stopped. He did not finish it. There was nothing to finish. Across the lobby, Ethan Ward crouched down beside his sleeping son and did not look at either of them, and somehow that was worse than if he had. A man enjoying his victory would have looked. This one simply gathered his child and waited for the people whose job it now was to fix what these two had broken. Roland Ashcroft, still near the desk, still waiting for a suite that was never coming, had noticed none of it yet. "Is my room ready or not?" he said, to no one in particular. Nobody answered him. That, too, he would come to understand shortly. The regional director, Marcus Dwyer, arrived at the Crestmont at 12:41 a.m. in a coat thrown over the clothes he had been sleeping in, with two members of the group's overnight response team behind him. He did not go to Ethan first. He had been instructed not to make a scene of it, and he understood, from the tightness in Claire Bennett's voice, exactly how serious this was. He went to the desk. What he said to Vanessa Crane and Tyler was brief and specific, and it was over quickly. Both of them were placed on immediate suspension pending termination, effective that moment. Their keycards collected. Their access revoked before they had left the building. The grounds were not in dispute and did not need to be argued: refusal to honor a paid reservation, reassignment of a guest's room without cause, and conduct toward a guest and a minor child that the company's own standards described. In plain language, as grounds for dismissal, there was a video record from the lobby cameras, there was the system log, there was nothing to interpret. The general manager of the Crestmont, a man named Gregory Mason, was called at his home at 1:05 in the morning. He was told to come in. He arrived before 2, gray-faced, and spent the small hours of the night in a conference room with Marcus Dwyer, explaining how a culture had taken root on his overnight shift in which a paying family could be turned away at the door, while a wealthy regular was handed their room as a gift, and how he had not known, or had not wanted to know, which amounted, at his level, to the same thing. It would not save his position. He understood that by the time the sun came up, Roland Ashcroft did not understand. At first, that anything had changed. He was still standing near the desk, checking his watch, waiting for the porter to take him up to 18. When Marcus Dwyer turned to him, Dwyer was polite, because the company was always polite, and because politeness at that moment was its own kind of blade. He informed Mr. Ashcroft that the suite was not available to him, that it belonged, as it always had, to another guest, and that in light of the evening's events, the group would be closing Mr. Ashcroft's loyalty account and would prefer that he seek accommodation elsewhere, that night and going forward, at any halcyon property. Ashcroft's face went through several expensive expressions in quick succession. "Do you have the faintest idea who I am?" he said. "I do, Mr. Ashcroft," Dwyer said. "That's rather the point." He gestured toward the doors, the same gesture Vanessa had made 20 minutes earlier, at another man, though the symmetry was lost on almost everyone in the room. A porter was already bringing his coat. At 12:52, Ethan Ward's phone buzzed. It was Claire Bennett. "It's handled," she said. "Marcus is on site. Your suite's being turned down right now, the real one. With an apology I promise you is sincere. Get that little boy to bed. And Ethan, I'm sorry it took a phone call. It shouldn't have." "I know," Ethan said, and left it there. He crossed the lobby to the chair where Leo had fallen fully asleep, the water bottle loose in his hands, and he crouched down and gathered his son back onto his shoulder as gently as he could. The boy murmured something and settled. As Ethan rose, Sam, the young porter, who had watched the last 20 minutes with a growing and disbelieving understanding of what he had witnessed, stepped forward. Uncertain now, unsure whether he was in trouble for the water and the biscuit. "Sir," Sam said, "I is your son, okay? Do you need anything for him? There's a pharmacy that delivers. I could." "He'll be all right," Ethan said. "It's just a fever. He needs to sleep." He looked at the young man for a moment. "You were the only person in this room tonight who treated him like a child. I want you to know I noticed that. It matters more than you think." Sam did not know what to say to that. He said, "Anyone would have, sir." "No," Ethan said quietly. "They wouldn't. That's the whole problem." And he carried his son toward the elevators. The corner suite on the 18th floor was, as it had always been, waiting for him. The bed was turned down. The lights were low. Ethan laid Leo in the center of it, worked the small boots off his feet, pulled the duvet up to his chin, and sat on the edge of the mattress for a while in the dark with his hand resting on his son's back, feeling the fever-fast rise and fall of his breathing slow, over long minutes, into the deep, even rhythm of real sleep. He did not feel triumphant. That was the part people who had never been through it always got wrong, the idea that being proven right and watching the people who wronged you pay for it felt like winning. What it actually felt like was tired, and something worse than tired. He had come to the Crestmont to check a property. Instead, he had watched a place he owned decide, in under 10 minutes, that a man and his sick child were beneath its notice, and he had watched them mean it. Being right had cost him nothing tonight, and everyone else their jobs, and none of it changed the fact that if he had actually been what he appeared to be, an ordinary tired father with no phone number that could take a hotel apart, he and his son would be standing on a sidewalk at 1 a.m, in the cold, with nowhere to go. That was the thought he could not put down. Not what they had done to him, what they would have done, without a second thought, to someone who could not fight back. He sat with it for a long time, in the low light, listening to his son breathe. Vanessa Crane did not go home when they took her keycard. She sat in her car in the Crestmont's underground garage for the better part of an hour, engine off, hands in her lap, trying to build a version of the night in which she had done the reasonable thing. It was a version she had constructed 100 times before, for 100 smaller decisions. And it had always held. A night manager had to make judgment calls, a busy shift, a difficult guest, a regular to keep happy. These were the ordinary pressures of the job, and she had handled them the way any experienced manager would. That was the story she reached for. The story would not hold this time, and she knew exactly why. It was not that the man had turned out to own the company. That was luck, or the absence of it, and luck was not a moral category. What she could not get around, sitting in the cold car, was the memory of the 30 seconds before any of that, before the phone call, before the regional director, before she knew who he was. In those 30 seconds she had looked at a tired man with a sick child, a man holding valid documentation she had refused to read, and she had decided he could be sent out into the night because there would be no cost to her for sending him. That was the part that had nothing to do with the chairman. She had not been careless. She had been certain and cruel. And she had been those things precisely because she had believed he was powerless. The lesson the industry would take from tonight: be careful. He might be someone was the wrong lesson. And she understood that better than anyone, because she was the one who had needed him to be someone before she would treat him like anyone at all. She had spent 3 years priding herself on how flawlessly she ran the overnight shift. The one thing she had never once measured was how it ran for the people she had already decided did not matter. That was the whole of her job, and she had failed the whole of it, and it had taken one phone call to make it visible. Tyler did not sit in a car. He walked. He left the Crestmont and walked 11 blocks in the wrong direction before he registered that he had no idea where he was going. He was 8 months into his first real job in hospitality, and he had spent those 8 months learning to read a lobby the way the senior people read it, quickly, confidently, sorting guests into those worth effort and those not. He had thought he was learning the trade. He understood now, walking, that he had been learning a habit, and that the habit had a cost, and that tonight the cost had simply arrived all at once, instead of quietly, invisibly, spread across every guest he had ever waved off. He kept coming back to the smallest thing, the boy asking, in that thick, sleepy voice, whether there was a bed yet. He had heard it. He had been standing right there. And he had heard a child ask for a bed. And he had done nothing, because the child's father was wearing the wrong jacket. No phone call had made that true. The phone call had only made it impossible to keep not seeing. By morning, the story had already begun to move, though not in the way the airplane video had, months before, in another city, to another quiet man. There was no clip this time, only a lobby camera in the company's own hands, and a regional office that had every reason to keep the details internal. But hotels are small worlds, and staff talk, and by the end of the week, the essential shape of it had traveled through the industry. A night manager and a clerk at the Crestmont walked out mid-shift for turning away a guest who had turned out to own the building. It became, for a while, a story people told each other as a caution, which was not the worst thing it could have become. Be careful how you treat the tired man in the cheap jacket. You never know. Ethan hated that version of the lesson. When it got back to him, it was the wrong lesson, and it was exactly the lesson he had spent a career trying to correct. The point was not that you should be kind to the shabby stranger because he might secretly be powerful. The point was that it should not require the threat of power to be treated like a human being at all. If the only thing standing between a family and the sidewalk was whether the man happened to have a chairman's phone in his pocket, then the whole thing was broken, and no number of fired clerks would fix it. So he did the thing he actually knew how to do, which was to change how the machine ran. Vanessa Crane and Tyler were not reinstated. The grounds were too clear, and Ethan did not intervene on their behalf, because some choices earn their consequences. But he did not stop there, and stopping there would have been the easy thing. In the weeks that followed, Halcyon Group rewrote the overnight standards across all 9 properties. Every reservation was to be honored on the record alone, not on the appearance of the guest, not on the preference of a manager, not on the tenure of a regular. No room that had been booked and paid for could be reassigned without a documented reason and a second sign-off, logged and reviewed. And a line went into the training materials, in plain language, at Ethan's specific insistence that the measure of the company was not how it treated the guests it wanted, but how it treated the ones it had already decided it didn't. Gregory Mason, the general manager, was let go before the month was out, not for the night itself, which he had slept through, but for the culture that had made the night possible, which he had not. In the review that followed, Mason argued, at first, that he could not be held responsible for the actions of 2 overnight employees making bad decisions while he was at home asleep. It was a reasonable-sounding defense, and it was also, Ethan told him directly in the one meeting they had, exactly the problem. A general manager who believed the character of his hotel switched off when he went home did not understand what a general manager was. The tone of the overnight shift, who got waved through and who got turned away, whose comfort was worth a keystroke and whose was not, did not appear out of nowhere at midnight. It was learned. It was permitted. It was the accumulated residue of 1,000 small signals about what the hotel valued and what it did not. And those signals came from the top, whether the top was awake to send them or not. Mason had run a property that scored beautifully in daylight and turned a feverish child out into the dark when it thought no one was watching. Both of those things were his. He had wanted the credit for the first without the accountability for the second, and that, Ethan said, was not a thing the job allowed. Mason left without a further argument. Somewhere in the meeting, Ethan suspected. He had understood that the argument was not one he could win, because it was not, at bottom, one he actually believed. Roland Ashcroft found that his account really had been closed, at all 9 hotels, and that the closure held even after his lawyer's letter arrived. He was, for perhaps the first time in a very long time, told no by people who had previously only ever told him yes, and there was no version of his name loud enough to reverse it. And Sam, the young porter who had crossed a lobby with a bottle of water for a feverish child while everyone senior to him looked away, received, 2 weeks later, a message that he read 3 times before he believed it. He was offered a place in the group's management development program, a fast track that people usually spent years fighting to reach, with a note attached that was only 1 line long. It said, "You already know the most important part of this job. Everything else can be taught." It was signed by the chairman. Ethan Ward flew home 2 days after that night, with a son who had shaken the fever and spent the return trip narrating, at length and with total authority, the plot of a cartoon his father did not understand. He did not tell Leo any of what had happened in the lobby. Leo would remember, if he remembered anything, only that they had waited a while, and that a nice man named Sam had given him water, and that the room had a very big window, and that his dad had sat with him until he fell asleep. That was the version Ethan wanted him to keep. Not the mockery, not the manager, not the phone call, just the water, and the window, and the hand on his back in the dark. Because Ethan Ward had learned, over a long life of walking into rooms looking like no one at all, a thing that he could not make anyone believe until they had lived it, that the way a person treats someone they are certain can do nothing for them, no favor, no tip, no consequence is not a small part of who they are. It is the whole of it. It is the only honest measurement there is, taken when they think no one important is watching. The Crestmont had been certain, that night, that no one important was watching. It had been wrong, but that, in the end, was never really the point.